Here's something that will shock you. Right now, at this very moment, Jamaica owns only 16% of what was once its most powerful symbol of independence. The rest, controlled by Trinidad and Tobago. We're talking about Air Jamaica, the airline that once carried the nation's pride across continents, now reduced to a minority stake in someone else's operation. But here's where it gets interesting. There's been talk, whispers really, about buying it back, taking back what was theirs, reclaiming that symbol of sovereignty. And when you dig into what that would actually cost, the numbers are absolutely staggering. Before we dive deeper into this financial maze, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. We're pushing hard to reach 5,000 subscribers, and your support makes these deep dives possible. All right, let's get into it. So what would it actually take to bring Air Jamaica back under Jamaican control? Here's what nobody tells you up front. There isn't just one answer. There isn't one price tag, because the real question isn't just about money. It's about what exactly you're buying back. Are you buying a name, a fleet of aircraft, a whole operation with all its debts and obligations? Each answer leads down a completely different path with completely different costs. And some of those paths lead to financial disaster. Let me paint you a picture of what was lost. Air Jamaica wasn't just another airline. When you saw those planes with the Jamaican colors cutting through Caribbean skies, it meant something. It was a declaration. A young nation, just decades from colonial rule, telling the world it could compete on the global stage. That airline connected Kingston to New York, to London, to Toronto. It employed thousands. It was independence made visible, tangible, real. For decades, it carried not just passengers, but national identity itself. But here's the thing about symbols. They're expensive to maintain. And Air Jamaica was bleeding money. Not just a little. We're talking about mounting losses, year after year after year. By the 2000s, the situation had gone from bad to catastrophic. The government kept writing checks, covering deficits, pouring taxpayer money into an operation that seemed incapable of turning a profit. Every year the hole got deeper. Every year the losses mounted. And every year the question became more urgent. How long can we keep this going? Then came 2010. Decision time. The Jamaican government made a choice that would haunt national conversations for years to come. They sold. Well, not exactly sold. They divested, handed over operations to Caribbean Airlines, a carrier based in Trinidad and Tobago. By 2011, the deal was done. Jamaica retained a tiny 16% stake. Everything else, gone. The routes, the operations, the control, all transferred away. Now you might think selling would save money. Cut losses, right? Walk away from a failing business and stop the bleeding. But here's the twist that nobody saw coming. Getting out cost a fortune. During the divestment process, Jamaica had to settle debts, cover obligations, and smooth the transition. Reports from that period show the government spent somewhere between $164 million and $200 million just to close the books. Let that sink in. They paid hundreds of millions to get rid of an airline that was losing money. That's how deep the financial hole had become. So fast forward to today. There's renewed interest in bringing Air Jamaica back. National pride never really died. And some people are asking, what would it take? Could Jamaica actually afford to buy back what it gave away? To answer that, we need to break this down into scenarios. Because as I said earlier, there are multiple ways this could happen, and each one comes with a wildly different price tag. Scenario 1 is the lightest touch approach. Buy back just the brand and the route rights. In this version, Jamaica doesn't operate any flights directly. They own the name Air Jamaica. They control certain route authorities. But they license everything out to an actual operator who handles the planes, the staff, the day-to-day logistics. Think of it like owning a franchise name, but letting someone else run the restaurant. How much would this cost? Rough estimates put the brand acquisition at around $30 million. Then you'd need another $20 million for working capital and a marketing blitz to relaunch the name with credibility. Total cost, $50 million. Now, $50 million sounds manageable compared to what's coming next. But even this scenario isn't simple. You'd need to find an operator willing to fly under the Air Jamaica banner. You'd need to negotiate terms. And you'd be trusting someone else to protect your national brand. Scenario 2 ramps things up significantly. Operations with leased aircraft. Now Jamaica isn't just owning a name. They're running actual flights. They'd acquire operational rights, hire flight crews, ground staff, management. But instead of buying planes outright, which costs hundreds of millions each, they lease them. Leasing is faster and cheaper up front. You can get aircraft flying within months instead of years. But here's the catch. You need massive working capital because airlines lose money at first. It takes time to build routes, fill seats, and generate positive cash flow. So what's the price tag for this scenario? About $100 million to acquire operational rights and basic assets. Add $80 million for 2 years of working capital to cover those initial losses. Then throw in $20 million for lease deposits and initial payments on roughly 6 narrow-body aircraft. Total cost, $200 million, 4 times more expensive than just buying the brand. And this scenario comes with massive operational risk because now Jamaica is responsible for keeping planes in the air, paying staff, and competing with established carriers. Scenario 3 is where things get truly expensive. Full acquisition and recapitalization. This means Jamaica takes back everything. The entire operation. Fleet, staff, maintenance bases, and here's the killer, all the liabilities. Remember those legacy debts and obligations that cost hundreds of millions to settle back in 2010. They'd be back on the table. Plus, you'd need to recapitalize the whole business, which means injecting enough money to not just acquire assets, but to fund years of operations while building profitability. The estimated cost, $300 million for the buyout itself, $400 million to cover legacy liabilities and obligations, another $400 million to partially replace the fleet and fund multi-year working capital needs. Add it up and you're looking at $1.1 billion. With a B, that's more than 20 times the cost of just buying back the brand. But wait, there's a fourth scenario, and it might be the most expensive of all. Starting completely from scratch. Forget buying anything back. Just create a brand new airline from zero. Apply for all the licenses. Negotiate new route authorities. Buy or lease a fresh fleet. Hire and train entirely new crews. Build ground infrastructure. Essentially, create a modern airline from nothing. This greenfield approach gives you total control and no legacy baggage. But it's phenomenally expensive and time-consuming. Industry estimates suggest launching a new regional carrier from scratch could easily exceed $1 billion, possibly reaching $1.5 billion or more, depending on fleet size and route ambitions. So we've got a range. At the low end, $50 million for just the brand. At the high end, well over $1 billion for a full acquisition or new start. That's a massive spread. And it raises the obvious question. How on earth would Jamaica pay for any of this? Let's talk funding options, because this is where financial creativity meets cold reality. Option 1 is the most straightforward and the most dangerous. Sovereign financing. The government issues bonds or dips into reserves. Let's say they need $500 million. They issue a bond at 5.5% interest. That means paying $27.5 million every single year just in interest payments. And this debt goes straight onto the national balance sheet. It affects Jamaica's credit rating. It impacts the government's ability to borrow for other priorities like infrastructure, education, healthcare. In a country where the budget is already tight, adding hundreds of millions in new debt for an airline is a massive gamble. Option 2 spreads the risk. Public-private partnership. The government doesn't go it alone. They bring in private investors who put up a significant chunk of the capital. Imagine the total cost is $400 million. Private investors take 60%, putting in $240 million. The government covers 40% or $160 million. This way, if the airline struggles, the government isn't holding the entire bag. But there's a trade-off. Private investors want returns. They want control. They want a say in strategy. And they'll push for profitability over prestige, which might mean cutting routes or services that are politically important but financially marginal. Option 3 is even lighter on government involvement, a concession or management contract. Jamaica owns the brand and maybe some assets, but an experienced global operator actually runs the airline. The operator takes a management fee and shares in revenues. This requires minimal upfront capital from the government and dramatically reduces operational risk. But it also means Jamaica doesn't really control its own airline. The operator makes the decisions. And if things go south, the government still owns a failed asset, just without having run it directly. Option 4 brings in a strategic partner with deep pockets. Sell a minority stake to a foreign airline. Let's say a major carrier buys 49% for $200 million. That values the company at just over $400 million total. Jamaica keeps 51% control and gets $200 million in cash to recapitalize operations. The foreign partner brings expertise, network connections, and management know-how. Sounds great, right? Except now you've got a foreign entity with significant influence over your national carrier. And if interests diverge, conflicts are inevitable. Option 5 uses specialized financing for hard assets. Sovereign-backed commercial loans or export credit financing specifically for purchasing aircraft. These loans typically come with lower interest rates because they're secured by the planes themselves. But here's the thing. It's still debt. It still adds to national liabilities. And if the airline fails, the government is left making payments on aircraft that aren't generating revenue. There's also a sixth approach that's been gaining attention. A phased buyback. Start small. Invest just $50 million to buy back the brand in a handful of key routes. Run that for 2 or 3 years. See if it's viable. If it works, expand gradually. Lease more planes. Add more routes. Grow organically. This minimizes near-term risk and lets the government test the waters before committing billions. But it's also slow. And in the airline business, slow can be deadly. Competitors don't wait. Market conditions shift. Windows of opportunity close. So funding is possible, but every single option comes with serious trade-offs. Which brings us to the elephant in the room. Even if Jamaica could fund a buyback, should they? Because here's what the numbers don't tell you. Running an airline is brutally difficult. And in the Caribbean, it might be nearly impossible to do profitably. Let's talk about why airlines are such terrible businesses. First, margins are razor thin. When fuel prices spike, profits evaporate. When demand drops even slightly, losses pile up fast. Airlines are exquisitely sensitive to external shocks. A hurricane season that scares away tourists. A global pandemic that grounds fleets. An economic recession that cuts business travel. Any of these can wipe out years of gains in months. And the Caribbean is especially vulnerable. The markets are small. Population bases are limited. Tourism is seasonal. Operating costs are high because everything, fuel, parts, train staff, is expensive to bring to the islands. Caribbean Airlines is a perfect case study. After acquiring Air Jamaica's operations, they struggled massively. Integration was far more expensive than projected. The hoped for synergies didn't materialize easily. They faced continued losses and required ongoing financial support from the Trinidad and Tobago government. If a relatively well-funded carrier backed by Trinidad and Tobago's energy wealth couldn't make the Air Jamaica operations work smoothly, what chance does Jamaica have going solo? And there's another problem that's rarely discussed openly, but everyone in the industry knows. Political interference. Government-owned airlines face constant pressure to make decisions based on politics rather than business logic. Run unprofitable routes because a constituency demands service. Hire excess staff because of political connections. Keep ticket prices artificially low to avoid public backlash. Make procurement decisions that favor local interests over efficiency. All of this slowly strangles profitability. And in a small country where politics are intensely personal, these pressures are almost impossible to resist. Then there's the competition factor. Jamaica wouldn't be operating in a vacuum. American Airlines, JetBlue, Southwest, they all serve Caribbean routes with massive scale advantages. They can absorb losses on individual routes because they're profitable overall. They have global networks that feed traffic into Caribbean destinations. They have procurement power that drives down costs. A reborn Air Jamaica would be a minnow fighting sharks, and history shows us what usually happens to minnows. Let's look at the broader pattern. National carriers across the Caribbean and Latin America have struggled for decades. BWIA in Trinidad folded and morphed into Caribbean Airlines, which still struggles. LIAT, the regional carrier serving smaller islands, has faced bankruptcy and restructuring multiple times. Mexicana, once a proud flag carrier, went under. Even larger carriers like TACA in Central America had to merge to survive. The graveyard of failed or struggling national airlines is crowded, and the few that survive often do so only with continuous government subsidies. So here's where we land. Could Jamaica buy back Air Jamaica? Technically, yes. The funding mechanisms exist. Whether it's government bonds, private partnerships, strategic investors, or phased approaches, there are ways to raise the money, depending on what exactly they want to buy back. The cost ranges from $50 million on the very low end to well over $1 billion for a full acquisition or fresh start. Those numbers are within the realm of theoretical possibility for a nation with Jamaica's economic profile. But here's the harder question. Should they? And this is where national pride collides with financial reality. Pride is powerful. The desire to control your own symbols of sovereignty is real and valid. Having an airline with your flag on it matters psychologically and culturally. But pride doesn't pay the bills. And the airline business is unforgiving. It burns through cash faster than almost any other industry. It's vulnerable to shocks that are completely beyond any single country's control. And in the Caribbean specifically, even the better managed carriers face constant headwinds. The uncomfortable truth is this. Air Jamaica failed the first time not because of bad luck or poor management alone, though both played roles. It failed because the fundamental economics were brutal. Small market, high costs, fierce competition, vulnerability to external shocks. All of those factors are still there. They haven't gone away. If anything, they've gotten worse with increased competition from low-cost carriers and the consolidation of major airlines. So if Jamaica did buy back Air Jamaica, they'd be betting that this time would be different. That they could somehow solve the problems that led to failure before, maybe with better management, maybe with more discipline around political interference, maybe with a smarter route network or more efficient operations. But that's a very big maybe, and it's a bet that would be made with hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of public money, money that could otherwise go to schools, hospitals, infrastructure, or paying down existing debt. There's also a question of opportunity cost that rarely gets discussed. What else could Jamaica do with $1 billion? They could dramatically upgrade tourism infrastructure, invest in renewable energy to reduce dependence on expensive imported fuel, build out digital infrastructure to attract tech companies, fund education initiatives to develop high-value skills in the workforce. Any of these might generate more economic return and more jobs than a financially shaky airline ever could. None of this means the dream is worthless. National symbols matter. And if Jamaica found a truly innovative model, Maybe partnering with a successful operator in a structure that genuinely shared risk and expertise. Maybe it could work, but it would require brutal honesty about the challenges, ironclad financial discipline, and the willingness to shut it down if losses mounted, even if that meant swallowing national pride again. The bottom line is this: Jamaica could afford to buy back Air Jamaica if they really wanted to. The question isn't capability, it's wisdom. Is this the best use of scarce resources? Can they succeed where they failed before? Are they prepared for the political and financial pain if it goes wrong again? These are questions without easy answers, but they're the questions that matter far more than just asking what the price tag would be. Because at the end of the day, buying back an airline isn't like buying back a building or a piece of land. You're not just acquiring an asset. You're taking on an enormously complex, expensive, risky operation that has broken the finances of countries far wealthier than Jamaica. And you're doing it in one of the most difficult markets in the world for aviation. That's not a decision to make based on emotion or nostalgia. It's a decision that requires cold, hard analysis of whether success is even possible. And right now, based on everything we know about airline economics and Caribbean aviation specifically, the answer is far from clear.